Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle without hurry. There is nowhere to go now and nothing you need to hold in place. The day can remain exactly as it is for a little while longer. The air does not need to soften all at once. The warmth does not need to reach you before it is ready. You only need to let yourself enter the evening, one quiet step at a time. Tonight's story is called Falling Asleep Beside Hestia's Sacred Fire. The evening has already thinned by the time you reach the temple steps. Not into darkness, not into night, only into that calmer part of dusk when colors begin to lose their brighter names, and the world gives itself more willingly to stone, shadow, and held air. The last light remains in the sky above the outer court, pale and widening rather than bright, and the stone beneath your feet keeps it differently from the earth below. The worn paving at the base of the steps is grayer where countless feet have passed, and smoother where rain and time have worked together over many seasons. Farther out, beyond the court's low boundary, the evening lies more openly across the ground. Here, nearer the temple, it has already begun to gather itself into order. Your steps slow without needing to be told to. The air is cooler than it was lower down the path. It touches the forehead, the bridge of the nose, the exposed line of wrist between sleeve and hand when the arm swings forward. The cloak at your shoulders keeps the rest of you well enough. A little of the evening has entered its outer folds, but not deeply. The body is still carrying its own warmth. It simply knows that warmth will soon have a different relation to the place ahead. The temple rises from the higher ground with a steadiness that does not depend on grandeur, though it has grandeur too. The columns come first in the fading light, their shafts pale where the day still touches them, and darker where shadow has already reached around. Their bases are broader than they seemed from below, and the steps between them stretch wider than a dwelling's threshold ever would. The roof above holds the last of the sky along its outer edge. Beneath it, the entrance has already darkened into a depth the evening cannot fully enter. Nothing about the structure announces itself in haste. It has no need to. The stone has already outlasted too many evenings for that. You come nearer. The upper steps are smoother along the center than at the edges, worn faintly hollow by long repeated passage. One corner keeps a darker streak where water has traveled in winter rains and then dried again under warmer months. Along the outer lip of the highest step, the stone is sharper where feet do not often fall. The body notices these things without dwelling on them. The temple does not need to be looked at as an image. It becomes certain through contact long before thought begins arranging its meanings. At the top of the steps, the air changes again, not by warmth, only by stillness. The open evening remains behind you in the court, above the wall, over the descending path, among the olives and low shrubs and the farther darkening ground. But beneath the roofline and between the columns, the air lies differently. It is less moved by what passes through it. It rests against stone. It keeps the faint stored cool of the structure rather than the freer cool of the outer world. Even before you cross the threshold, the temple begins to quiet the evening into another condition. A bronze ring hangs at the inner side of the great wooden door. It is brighter where hands have steadied it most often, and duller along the lower arc where fingers do not naturally close. The wood behind it is darker from oil and touch, lighter toward the outer grain where the hand never falls. When you place your palm against the ring, the metal is cooler than skin, but not with the clean severity of iron left fully in the open air. This is interior coolness, held coolness, the kind that belongs to bronze kept within stone. You draw the door inward. The sound it makes is lower than the movement itself suggests. The door is too heavy and the threshold too deep for any quick answer. Wood passes over stone with a contained weight. The hinge gives one old note and then is still. The darkness beyond does not rush out. The evening behind does not follow you in. The passage opens only enough for one body and the quiet it carries with it. You step through. At once, the temple receives you into another order of air. Not warm, not even gentled, yet in the way a fire-warmed room might be gentled. Only held. The coolness inside rests in the paving underfoot, in the lower bases of the columns, in the walls where the day has left, and the night has not yet entered fully. It touches the face less sharply than the open evening did. It meets you all at once rather than in passing currents. Outside, the dusk had movement in it, however light. Here, movement belongs elsewhere. The door closes behind you with a weight the room accepts and keeps. No echo follows. Only the temple around it, receiving the sound as soon as it is made. For a moment, you remain just inside and let the body understand the shift fully. The floor beneath your feet is stone worn smoother in one path than another. The center keeps a faint polish from repeated use, while the outer bands nearer the wall retain a grainier dryness where feet pass less often. The air smells faintly of old smoke, cooled bronze, stone that has held day and released it, and the last dry trace of oil from lamps extinguished earlier. Nothing in the sanctuary is lifeless. Nothing has gone stale. It is simply in its evening state already, waiting for the final order of the night to gather around what remains burning at its center. The first awareness of the sacred fire comes not as brightness, but as orientation. There, within the inner chamber, beyond the first stretch of dim floor and the nearer rise of columns, the flame is already present. It does not flare. It does not command the room with spectacle. It rests in a broad bronze vessel set low enough that the stone behind it remains visible, and high enough that the light can travel outward from it in a measured circle. The fire is not large. It does not need size to carry authority. What the body understands at once is that this flame was here before you entered, and would matter deeply if it were not. Its light moves differently from household firelight. It is steadier at the core, less given to sudden reaching, narrower where it rises, and broader where it rests against the bronze lip that holds it. The vessel's rim answers with a soft line of reflected gold, brighter on one side where hands have wiped or touched it more often, darker where smoke has deepened the metal over time. The paving nearest the flame takes the light in shallow planes. The columns do not brighten all at once. Their nearer curves answer first, and only lower down. The upper shafts remain in temple dusk. Light here does not fill the space. It chooses it. You move farther inward. The sanctuary does not reveal itself all at once. One column passes at your left shoulder, its stone cooler in the shadowed band than where the last of the outer light touched it near the threshold. A low ledge along the wall keeps a shallow brightness at its edge and darkness beneath. The chamber beyond the flame remains partially withdrawn, but not blank. A basin sits to one side, its inner curve gathering more shadow than the outer rim. A folded wool cloth rests on a stool lower than the basin, the cloth thicker at one end where it has been doubled from long habit in the same way. None of these things asks to be admired. They are already within the temple's use. The paving changes as you approach the flame. Near the threshold, the stone had kept more of the evening's coolness. Here the floor is different by only a little, but enough for the body to register it through the soles. The warmth has not spread broadly. It lives close to the central fire, and in the bronze near it. A stone can hold that difference honestly. It does not pretend to be warm because flame exists somewhere above it. One section receives, another does not. The temple makes no effort to disguise those truths. There is a low stool near the inner side of the sanctuary. Its seat has been worn smoother at the center than at the edges. One leg keeps a darkened polish where hands have shifted it often by that same point. Beside it stands a narrow vessel for oil. its neck brighter than its body from repeated lifting, its rounded shoulder carrying the dull bloom that Merrill takes from long keeping. A spoon-like bronze measure rests across its mouth, one side slightly bent into the shape years of handling have taught it. Nearby, a folded strip of linen lies over the ledge with one crease deeper than the others, as though always taken up from that same place at the same stage of evening. You come to the edge of the fire's immediate circle and stop. From here, the relation of things becomes clearer. The sacred flame at the center, the vessel holding it, the paving that changes by degrees around it, the basin and oil vessel to one side, the stool and folded cloth, the columns beyond receding into a coolness and dimness the fire does not try to conquer. The farther wall, where a shallow shelf keeps a few small objects in darker outline, a bowl perhaps or a covered jar, one low shape beside another. Above all of this, the higher chamber disappears before it is fully seen. The stone keeps its height in shadow. The flame governs below. The upper darkness remains its own. That upper dimness is not empty. It carries the room's age in a way the lower chamber does not need to explain. Soot has touched the stone above the flame across many evenings. The dark there is not the dark of neglect. It is the dark of repeated keeping. The eye cannot read every line of the roof or beam or recess, but it does not need to. The sanctuary already feels older than the evening now happening inside it. You lower one hand to the nearest edge of the bronze vessel, not to touch the flame, only to feel the relation between fire, metal, and body. The rim is warmer at one place than another. Nearer the flame's center, the bronze holds a softened heat through its thickness. Farther away, it returns more quickly toward the coolness of the surrounding room. The difference is slight but unmistakable. The hand learns at once that this fire has been burning a while already, steadily enough to enter the metal, not widely enough to change the whole chamber with it. This is not the beginning of the fire. It is the continuation of something tended before your arrival. You withdraw your hand and remain there a little longer. Outside, the evening continues to fade. You know this not because the temple shows it fully, but because the threshold behind you has altered. The outer opening is no longer a clear source of separate light. It has become part of the sanctuary's boundary, a dimmer shape with pale dusk held beyond it. The world outside is already less important than it was on the steps. The temple is beginning to remove it from use, not by force, by giving the body something more exact to belong to. You turn slightly and let the rest of the sanctuary gather itself more fully. The basin's inner curve catches one line of the flame and keeps it. The oil vessel answers more darkly, the bronze at its neck bright where fingers have found it often, and the rest of it carrying a deeper brown below. The stool does not shine at all. Its wood has been handled enough to smooth, not enough to reflect. One foot sits more firmly into the stone than the others. The folded wool cloth on it keeps a denser edge where the evening hand always takes hold first. A shallow hollow in the paving just beside the fire's nearer side suggests not damage, but repetition, kneeling, perhaps, or the setting down of one particular object in the same place through many cycles of dusk. Nothing here is ornamental in the lesser sense. The sanctuary does not gather beauty by display. It gathers it by continuity. The bronze has been handled. The stone has been passed over. The cloth has been folded and unfolded. The stool has been steadied and moved back. The threshold has admitted evening after evening and kept them all in the same order. But here, within the stone-held chamber, and beside the flame already burning in its bronze vessel, everything the night will require is present in waiting form. The temple has stopped being an approached place and become the place you are in. Nothing is missing. The final evening tending waits. You remain at the edge of the sacred fire for one more quiet moment and let the temple hold its present condition around you. The paving keeps its cooler distance beyond the circle of light. The bronze vessel carries the flame without flourish. The sanctuary wall and columns remain partly in shadow, not hidden, only reserved. The last of the outer evening rests beyond the entrance, now too far from the center of the room to matter much. Everything that the night will later depend upon is already here. Nothing has been made, nothing has been kindled, nothing has been invented. The sacred flame continues, and you have arrived in time to tend what is already living. And there, with the dusk left outside the threshold, the stone chamber gathered around one steady central fire, and the tools of the final evening order already waiting in their worn and rightful places, the sanctuary reaches its first true stillness at last. The temple is entered, the flame is present, and the night is ready to be tended. You move closer to the sacred fire because the temple has reached the point where looking is no longer enough. The flame already lives in its bronze vessel. The chamber already knows how to hold it. What remains is the final evening order that lets both continue properly into night. You kneel at the nearer side where the paving keeps its slight hollow from repeated use. At this height, the stone gives itself more clearly. The surface nearest the fire is smoother than the band beyond it, not because it has been polished deliberately, but because knees, feet, cloth, bowl, and hand have returned to this same place through too many evenings to leave it unchanged. A shallow dip near the bronze vessel's edge keeps a darker tone where oil or ash or touched water may once have settled and dried. Farther out, the paving returns to a drier grain, cooler in color, and less accustomed to direct attention. The bronze vessel sits low and broad before you. Its outer rim is brighter at one arc than at another, as though hands have steadied it most often from that same side. The inner bowl darkens where the firelight cannot fully reach, but the lip nearest the flame answers with a soft line of gold. The vessel is not polished for display. It has been kept by use. Fine smoke has entered the shallower markings near its base. The broader curve remains darker where cloth does not often pass over it. The body learns all of this at once, not as history, only as the rightness of something repeatedly handled. The flame itself has changed a little while you have been in the chamber, not in size, only in bearing. It lifts more steadily now from the heart of the bowl than it did at first, narrower where it rises, broader where it gathers low among the darker fuel beneath. The edges of its light have become calmer. What at first seemed only presence now shows its needs. The bronze has warmed where the fire has been constant longest. The outer edge remains cooler. The flame does not ask to be enlarged. It asks to be continued. You reach for the oil vessel. Its neck has been brightened by long repeated touch. The bronze there smoother than along the rounded body below. The vessel's weight is greater than it appeared from standing height, though not burdensome. The handle is less polished than the neck, suggesting that hands more often steady than carry it far. Across the mouth rests the small bronze measure, its bowl darkened on the underside, and lighter at the lip where oil has washed and been wiped away many times before. You lift the measure and lower it into the vessel. The sound is slight, no more than a muted metal answer from within. When it comes up again, the oil it carries does not shine brightly in the temple dim. It gathers the fire in its surface only for an instant before becoming darker again, heavier than water, slower to settle in the shallow bowl. A faint scent rises, not perfume, not sweetness, only the clean, dense smell of oil kept for flame. You pour with care, not onto the flame itself, not with spectacle, only to one side where the bronze curves inward and the fuel below can take it properly. The fire answers at once, but not dramatically. One edge brightens. a lower thread of gold becomes more certain. The core of the flame deepens into steadier color, and the bowl beneath it gives a faint warm click as the fresh oil and the heated metal enter relation. Then stillness. Then the same steadier burning again, as though the flame had only been reminded of what it had always meant to do. You set the measure aside on the folded cloth. The cloth keeps a denser crease at one end where it has often been taken up or laid down from that same side. Its weave is thicker than linen and softer than rough wool, made to receive oil or bronze without complaint. One corner remains more sharply folded than the others. The stool beneath it is smoother at the middle than near the legs, and one edge of the seat has darkened where fingers have gripped it more often when drawing it nearer. The temple around you changes by one quiet degree. The difference is not visible everywhere at once. The nearest paving takes it first. The stone nearest the vessel no longer reads only as cool gray receiving light. It begins to hold a little of the fire's warmth in its tone, not heat enough to be felt through the hand unless touched directly, only enough to alter what the eye believes about it. The bronze rim answers next, brighter in one line and deeper in shadow below. The lower curve of the nearest column keeps a more definite edge. The upper stone remains almost entirely its own. You reach for the small bronze rod resting beside the hearth bowl. Its tip is darkened from repeated contact with fuel and heat. The handle is smoother where the fingers close, and a slight flattening at one side suggests the same grip used many nights in succession. When you lower it into the vessel, the flame bends once around the metal and then rights itself again. You do not disturb the center, only the outer edge where a darker piece has settled inward and narrowed the breadth of the bowl more than it should. A gentle adjustment, a slight shift of blackened material, a low, dry answer from within the vessel. Then a clearer line opens at the base of the flame, and the light moves upward with less hesitation than before. The light moves upward with less hesitation than before. The fire no longer only burns. It has been corrected into its proper evening form. You return the rod to its place. The bronze meets stone with a small contained note and then is still. The temple keeps that sound at once. Nothing in here travels farther than it is meant to. The columns hold it. The paving takes it. The upper dimness leaves it below. A little ash has gathered along one inner edge of the vessel where old burning has left its dry, pale trace. You take the folded cloth, pass it once along the cooler outer lip, and gather that fine line away. Not fully. Not so thoroughly that the bronze would lose the look of continued use. Only enough to keep the vessel honest in the hand and clean in the part nearest the tending. The cloth darkens by almost nothing where it receives the mark, then is folded back over itself again and laid where it was before. Even that small motion changes the order around the fire. A touched object is no longer waiting. It has entered the evening. Beside the sanctuary basin sits a shallower bowl of water. Its surface answers the fire with a lower glow than oil ever could. The rim is smoother where hands have lifted it most often, and rougher toward one side where the bronze casting kept more of its original grain. You lift it not to carry it away, only to bring it nearer while you dip the fingers, and cool the cloth's edge before wiping once more along the measure's lip. The water's touch is cooler than the stone and cleaner than the air. A drop escapes and darkens the paving in one small round mark. It will dry later. It does not matter. You set the bowl back. Its base meets stone in the same ring it has learned over many evenings. The slight pale line beneath it shows where bronze has rested on the same patch often enough to leave its memory there. The threshold behind you has dimmed further while you worked. The outer evening no longer even keeps the authority of pale light there. It is only a boundary now, a cooler opening at the far side of the sanctuary through which the world beyond remains known, but increasingly unnecessary. What governs the room is here at the center: fire, bronze, stone, oil, hand, repeated action. You rise only slightly from kneeling and draw the low stool closer. Its leg gives a faint wooden answer where it crosses the paving. One catches a little at the edge of the shallow floorware near the fire, then settles over it. The folded cloth remains atop it. Beside it, you place the oil vessel with its neck turned outward in the easiest reach. The measure is laid across the lip once more. These are not decorative placements. They are the temple deciding where the next hand will naturally go if the flame needs one more quiet act before deep night. By setting them properly, you remove the need for thought later. The basin is angled by a fraction. The cloth is folded once more. The rod lies nearer the vessel than before. The bowl's brighter rim turns slightly inward and answers more of the fire than of the threshold. Little in the sanctuary has changed, yet the chamber no longer looks like a place waiting to be used. The wool cloth hanging farther down the ledge is the next thing your hand reaches. It is thicker than the smaller folded cloth and keeps the creases of repeated evening folding more deeply. One side is thinned slightly where it has been doubled over the same line too many times to count. You lift it and place it nearer the stool, not beside the fire itself, only within the ring where warmth and hand can meet it without stretching. The movement adds another texture to the sanctuary's inner order. Bronze, stone, oil, wool, fire. The body already understands how these belong together. The sanctuary answers again in light. The nearest paving now keeps the fire differently from how it did when you entered. The bronze bowl is steadier in tone. The basin's rim catches the lower gold more cleanly. The lower curve of one column is no longer merely in partial firelight, but begins to take on the character of evening stone that will remain in relation to flame for hours. A wall is not altered all at once by a sacred fire. It is altered first where the light rests, then where the warmth persists, and only much later in the memory it keeps. The temple is now in the earliest stage of that change. You return your hand to the rim of the bronze vessel once more. Warmer now, not hot, only more certain. The difference confirms what the room already knows. The flame has accepted the tending. It is no longer merely present. It has been carried into night order. There is a ledge farther back where a small cup waits beside another vessel. The cup is narrower at the base and broader at the lip, with one side thinned where mouths have returned to it most often. Its inner glaze or polish has darkened low along one curve from repeated warm drink or water, without ever becoming stained in any way that needs attention. You bring it nearer, not yet to fill it, only to let it belong to the circle of the fire and the stool and the oil and cloth. The temple at night requires fewer distances between necessary things. When you set the cup down, the sound is lighter than bronze on stone and warmer in tone. It does not ring. It rests. You remain kneeling a little longer, not because more needs to be done, but because the chamber is still settling around what has been done. The flame keeps its narrower lift. The bronze holds its warmer rim. The paving keeps one darkened drop where water touched and will later disappear. The cloth lies ready. The stool is in place. The oil vessel has been brought near. The cup now belongs to the fire's side rather than the farther ledge. The threshold has dimmed. The outer world has gone another small degree away. A faint sound comes from beyond the entrance, not clear enough to belong to any single source. Perhaps a foot over stone in the court. Perhaps a shifting branch beyond the wall. Perhaps only the evening air moving where the outer columns meet the open. By the time it reaches the chamber, it has no force left. The temple keeps it at its proper distance. Nothing in here is interrupted by it. That too is part of the night order. The outer world may continue, but it will no longer enter the sanctuary on equal terms. You lower yourself from kneeling to sitting on the stool. At once, the body enters a different relation to the fire. The work position is over. The flame does not become less important, it becomes less task-bound. The stool receives your weight honestly. One side of the seat is smoother than the other, and one front leg keeps a faint wobble until your feet settle and steady it by habit. The wool cloth rests near the knee. The cup is close enough to lift when needed. The oil waits. The rod waits. None of them demands action now. They have simply been left within right reach. The columns remain partly in shadow. The upper chamber remains its own darker architecture. The basin, vessel, stool, ledge, cup, and cloth all remain physically themselves, but the chamber no longer reads as an entered place. It reads as a tended one. The body is no longer here to arrive or to correct. It is here to remain. You rest your hands loosely together and look toward the flame. Its lower body is deeper than when you first saw it. The core burns with less flicker. The outer edges no longer reach in uncertainty. What movement it keeps now belongs to steadiness rather than trying. The sacred fire has accepted what it needed. The temple has answered. The evening can continue from here without further making. A little warmth now reaches the nearer stones more honestly than before. The bronze vessel keeps it. The air above the bowl lifts it. The body, seated at the proper distance, feels it only slightly at the hands and face. You reach at last for the cup and fill it with a little water from the basin. The sound is low and brief, and the cup takes the weight without fuss. The water carries the fire only as reflection, not as heat. When you lift it, the rim meets the mouth along the same thinned edge the hand had already found. The first sip is cooler than anything else in the room, and because it is cooler, it clarifies the relation of all the other temperatures around you. Fire at the center, bronze warmed by nearness, stone holding steadier cool beyond it, air suspended between, body entering all of it without strain. You lower the cup. The sanctuary now holds silence properly. Not empty silence, not waiting silence. A silence made from the fact that the useful acts have been done in their right order. The oil has been poured, the rim wiped, the stool drawn nearer, the flame steadied, and there, with the sacred fire fed and steadied, the bronze and stone already answering it more deeply than before, the final necessary objects brought into their proper nearness, and the outer evening diminished to a distant condition beyond the threshold, the sanctuary reaches its first true night readiness at last. The evening tending is complete, and the living fire can now be sat beside in peace. For a while, nothing more is required than remaining where you are. The oil has been poured, the bronze lip wiped, the stool drawn nearer, the cloth folded back into place, the cup brought within easy reach. The sacred fire no longer needs the hand. It can now be sat beside. That change enters the body at once, not as relief exactly, but as a quieter relation to the chamber. The work position has ended. The flame remains. The sanctuary has accepted the final useful acts of the evening and settled around them. You sit with your hands at rest. The warmth reaches them first, not deeply, only enough to distinguish them from the cooler air farther from the basin. Then the lower face. Then the knees where the body angles toward the fire without quite choosing to. The rest of the chamber remains cooler. The paving beyond the nearer stones has not changed simply because the flame has been steadied. The far columns still keep their dusk tones. The upper chamber remains its own dimness above the reach of this smaller, steadier light. The sanctuary is not becoming warm. It is becoming ordered around warmth. The cup rests between your hands for a little while before you drink again. Its rim is thinner on one side than the other, and the mouth finds that thinner place before thought names it. The bronze or clay has been smoothed by use at the same points again and again. The lower curve keeps a faint darkening within from many evenings of water or warmed drink. The body understands this easily. A vessel used long enough stops feeling like an object and begins to feel like part of the order in which the evening is carried. When you lift it, the water is cooler than the fire-warmed air nearest the basin and warmer than the outer stone beyond it. Even that difference belongs. You drink. The water does not alter the chamber. It only lets the body feel its temperatures more precisely. The sacred flame remains the center. The bronze vessel holding it is warmer now at the nearer arc than when you first touched it. The paving nearest the basin has begun to lose some of its earlier gray remoteness and take on the faintest low amber cast. The stool beneath you still keeps one cooler leg where the fire does not quite reach. The stone beyond the columns remains almost entirely untouched. Nothing here is pretending to be more changed than it is. That honesty is one of the temple's deepest comforts. You lower the cup again. The sound it makes against the ledge is small and contained. The sanctuary takes it at once and keeps it low. Nothing in the chamber answers with echo. The columns are too broad for that. The stone has been listening too long. Even the upper darkness does not throw sound back. It lets it remain below with the fire and the body and the objects nearest them. The sacred flame has changed since the final oil was poured, not in its essential shape, only in certainty. The lower body of the flame is denser now, less given to slight wavering at the edges. It rises in one main line and divides only briefly before gathering itself again. The bronze bowl beneath it no longer seems merely to contain fire. It seems to belong to its steadiness. One part of the rim carries a brighter answer where cloth and hand have wiped it more often. Another keeps the deeper brown that smoke and years have given it. The difference is slight, but it is enough to make the vessel feel lived with rather than displayed. The basin beside it keeps one line of lower light along its curve. Its inner surface remains darker than its edge, but no longer entirely. One shallow gleam travels along the water and disappears when the fire shifts, then returns not because the basin has changed, but because the flame keeps altering the room in small measured ways without ever becoming restless. The bowl exists for use. The ledge exists for placement. The stool exists for sitting. The folded cloth exists for touch, oil, and heat. Repeated use has worn these things into right relation. You let your gaze travel farther out from the center. The nearest column base answers first, its lower stone receiving the fire in one broad side, while the farther curve remains cool and dim. Above that, the shaft withdraws quickly into grayer shadow. The capital high above is not fully seen, only implied where darkness changes density. The sanctuary does not surrender its height simply because the lower chamber has grown inward around the flame. That vertical distance matters. It lets the room remain solemn while the lower air becomes habitable. The upper dark is one of the temple's quietest truths. It is not empty. It is not threatening. It is only older than the evening currently happening below it. Smoke has touched stone there over too many nights to leave the upper chamber innocent of fire, and yet the fire cannot claim it entirely. The lower world of the sanctuary, bronze, paving, cloth, hand, cup, basin, stool, belongs to tending and nearness. The upper world belongs to continuance. Beam, recess, darkened stone, unseen height. The eye does not need to read every part of it. It is enough that it remains above the flame as a second order of the room. You rest one hand lightly against the stool's edge. The wood is smoother where the hand closes naturally, and rougher beneath where fingers do not often pass. One corner carries a darkened polish from years of being turned or drawn closer by that same point. Even seated still, You can feel the temple's age through such things, not because they are described as ancient, because no new object wears like that. Repeated use gives it away every time. The folded wool cloth nearest your knee has loosened slightly where you last set the bronze measure upon it. One edge remains more deeply creased than the others, and the fibers at that fold have thinned almost imperceptibly from being bent and released in the same way through many evenings. You straighten it once without needing to. The cloth answers in silence. The small act changes almost nothing, but the body understands why it wanted to do it. In a place kept properly, even stillness likes correctness. The threshold behind you has dimmed further. What outer light remains there no longer acts as light for the room. It belongs to the world outside, not the chamber. Inside, the flame and the smaller gleams it calls from bronze and stone govern everything that matters. The paving near the basin is claimable now in a way it was not when you entered. The ledge and stool and vessel and cup no longer look like things waiting to be used. They have all crossed into use and come to rest there. Farther back, the shelf against the wall holds its kept objects more quietly than before. A bowl dark within, a covered jar low and still, one folded length of cloth or wool at the end. Nothing on the shelf presses forward. The fire reaches only enough to prove they are there and then leaves them to themselves again. This is one of the temple's best qualities. It does not flatten its own depth by making everything equally visible. It lets nearer things become nearer and farther things remain farther. You shift only a little on the stool. The leg that had been less steady settles more honestly beneath your weight now. The body has stopped perching. It has begun to remain. The hands no longer hover near the rod or oil. The eyes no longer move toward the basin in readiness. The shoulders are not arranged for tending. They are arranged for staying. A faint sound comes from outside the sanctuary, not enough to be identified. By the time it crosses threshold and stone, it has become only proof that the outer world continues somewhere beyond the columns and steps. The temple receives that too and keeps it low. What matters now is not weather or path or the cooling court beyond the entrance. What matters is this lower circle around the sacred flame and the quieter, older stone that holds it. You look once more at the bronze vessel. The phrase comes naturally to the body now. Not fire in a bowl, but the sacred fire. The distinction is not decorative. It is made by continuity. A household flame is lit to begin warmth. This flame was burning before you arrived and is being carried into night by care rather than invention. The paving near the kneeling hollow darkens very slightly where the basin's water still left one small mark. Even that belongs. The mark does not look like accident. It looks like use. Stone that has lived beside ritual objects, oil, water, cloth, bronze, and repeated evening hands knows how to carry such things without mess and without preciousness. The hollow itself, just off the fire's nearer side, now seems more certain than when you first noticed it. A place worn by kneeling can feel like part of the architecture once it has been repeated often enough. Bronze learns the hand, stone learns the knee, cloth learns the fold, wood learns the grip, a cup learns the mouth, and the body, entering for one evening more, learns the temple by touching what has already learned so many others. You drink again, more slowly. The water no longer feels like contrast so much as relation. The fire is steady enough that your awareness no longer separates every small change in its shape. The cup no longer needs to be thought of as cup. It is simply the warm, cool thing in your hands beside the living flame. The stool no longer needs to be considered as furniture. It is the right place from which to remain. The ledge beside you keeps what the hand may need and asks nothing more. The sanctuary is beginning to simplify itself not by dissolving, but by proving that all its parts are already where they should be. The columns remain partly in shadow. If the room gave itself up too fully, it would lose what makes it temple rather than chamber. The lower world may now be intimate, but the upper and farther reaches must keep their reserve. One column edge catches the fire and then loses it. The next remains mostly cool. Beyond those, the wall receives only a low diluted tone. The temple is not revealing itself. It is consenting to be lived inside for the night. A narrow strip of woven wool lies folded on the farther end of the ledge. You notice it now because the fire has changed angle enough to find one edge. The fibers have been pressed flatter at the middle than at the ends, suggesting repeated folding around the same line. You do not take it up yet. It simply enters the room's order as one more sign that the evening has further phases to come. The sleeping place has not yet claimed the body, but the idea of later warmth now exists quietly within reach. The body feels that before thought does, not as tiredness, not yet, only as a lessening of any desire to remain holy at the center. The sacred fire is still the sanctuary's heart. It will remain so. But the body no longer needs to work at that heart in order to belong here. A quieter belonging has become possible. Sitting beside the flame is enough now. And because sitting is enough, the next movement of the evening can later become rest without strain. For a while, you let the temple carry that truth without hurrying it. The stool holds. The cup rests again near your hand. The folded cloth remains close. The basin keeps one faint answer to the fire. The bronze vessel carries the flame in its steadier form. The columns rise partly lit and mostly dim. The upper chamber remains beyond full sight. The threshold has become only the place where the outer evening no longer matters. It is a place being inhabited beside a living center. The lower stones have accepted the evening. The bronze has taken heat and touch. The objects nearest the flame have all crossed from waiting into use. The farther chamber has not been banished. It has only withdrawn to the right distance. The body belongs here without needing to explain itself. You reach once more for the cup, finish what remains, and set it down. The vessel is now lighter than before, and the hand knows that too. One final small contact against the ledge, then stillness. The cup can remain there. Nothing needs to be cleaned away. Nothing needs to be restored to untouched arrangement. The temple is beyond that stage of evening. It is complete enough to let used things remain used. The sleeping place has not yet entered the room as action. It has begun to enter it as possibility. And there, with the flame no longer asking to be tended, the bronze and stone settled into their evening relation. The sanctuary's worn objects quiet in their proper nearness, and the larger temple held above and beyond the fire in solemn dimness. The chamber reaches its next true stillness at last. The living fire can now be sat beside, and the night is ready to narrow gently toward rest. For a while longer, you remain seated beside the sacred fire and let the sanctuary hold its full evening shape around you. Nothing near the flame is unfinished now. The oil vessel stands where the hand will find it easily if needed later. The cloth has been folded back into its known crease. The bronze rod rests where it belongs. The cup can remain where it was set down. The basin keeps its low reflection of the fire. The flame itself no longer asks to be corrected or fed. It has crossed from tending into continuance. You rest one hand lightly on the stool and feel how much the chamber has altered since you entered it. The lower stone nearest the basin no longer carries the same untouched coolness. The bronze lip of the vessel has taken a steadier warmth. The nearest column base now belongs more to firelight than to dusk. Even the ledge at your side, with its cloth and cup and smaller objects, has passed from waiting into use. The sanctuary can now go on without your hands at its center. You lift the small lamp. Its bronze base is warmer near the bowl than along the upper stem where the fingers close. The flame within it is smaller and steadier than the sacred fire behind you. It does not try to govern the room. It only gathers a nearer certainty around itself. When you raise it from the ledge, the sanctuary alters at once. The basin's curve darkens where the lamp has been. The cloth loses one line of amber. The cup recedes. Nothing disappears. The room simply redistributes itself. You stand beside the sacred fire one last moment and look back properly. The lower chamber remains complete. The bronze vessel with its steady flame, the worn paving nearest it, the stool, the basin, the oil vessel with its brightened neck, the cloth folded into its familiar shape, the cup resting where it was last used, the nearest columns answering the fire while the higher stone keeps its reserve. You turn from the flame. The first steps away from the center make the chamber's distances plain at once. The warmth leaves the hands and face first, though not completely. It remains as memory in the skin, while the cooler temple air begins to meet the sides of the body again. The paving beyond the fire's immediate ring is different underfoot, too. Less changed, more stone kept, smoother in some worn places, and drier in tone where heat has not lingered long. The lamp in your hand carries a small amber field ahead of you. The sacred flame remains behind, and lower, broader in authority, though now farther away. The sleeping place waits along the inner side of the sanctuary, beneath a stretch of wall, where the chamber lowers its claim on height without losing it altogether. It is not a second room. It is the temple made narrower at night. The platform runs along the wall broad enough for lying, and long enough that the body need not curl against its own length. One side is edged by a rail smoother at the upper line than below, polished where hands and knees have found it often. At the nearer end stands a carved upright, its edges brighter where fingers have caught it over many evenings, its recesses darker where touch does not often pass. The lamp finds these things first, and then the bedding beyond them. The lower woven layer lies flatter at the center than at the edges. Above it rests thicker wool, folded, and turned back from one side where the body always enters. A fur covering lies over that, heavier at one end than the other, with its longer hairs catching the lamp while the hide beneath remains darker. The bolster keeps its known compression at the center, and firmer rise toward the ends. Nothing here has been made ready theatrically. It has been kept. You set the lamp on the narrow ledge beside the sleeping place. At once the room rearranges itself around this smaller center. The platform, rail, folded coverings, and wall beside you become the nearest world. The sacred fire remains visible across the chamber, but no longer in the same relation. It is farther now, lower in the room, and more structural than intimate. The basin near it answers with a small line of light. One column edge catches the fire, and then loses it. The upper chamber remains mostly beyond both flames, large enough to keep its darkness and oldness intact. You touch the rail with one hand. The wood is smoother where bodies have steadied themselves while turning in. A small nick in the grain has darkened with time until it no longer reads as damage, only as part of the place's truth. The hand knows at once that the sleeping platform has held many nights before this one. The temple does not need to declare that. Its surfaces already do. You turn back the upper fur a little farther. The underside is cooler than the outer surface that has sat longer in the room's held air. Beneath it, the wool layer is cooler still, but cleanly so, without the severity of open stone or bronze. The woven lower layer has that dry waiting feel bedding acquires when it has been folded, and unfolded many times in the same careful order. One edge lifts more easily than the other. The body understands from that alone which side is entered most often. You begin to remove what remains of the evening. The outer wrap comes free first, and is laid over the rail where it can keep its fold without slipping. Sandals are eased off and set below with their toes turning inward by habit. The skin beneath them meets the cooler temple air more directly for a moment, and the difference between sanctuary center warmth and sleeping place coolness becomes fully clear. Rest here will not come from carrying the fire with you. It will come from letting the bedding answer the body in its slower way, while the sacred flame continues at a distance. You sit on the edge of the platform. It receives your weight honestly. It does not sink far. It does not remain hard. One place yields and then steadies. The woven and woolen layers give just enough before the broader support beneath makes itself known. The fur beside your hand is heavier than it looked when folded back. The bolster is not softness for its own sake. It is support shaped by many nights into familiarity. The body learns that quickly and trusts it. The fire is still there, but no longer as direct company. Once or twice, a low inward settling comes from the sacred vessel across the chamber, rounded by the paving and columns between you and it. The sound no longer asks for action. It belongs to reassurance. The sacred center continues. The sleeper need not remain beside it for that to be true. You draw your legs up and under the coverings. The first touch of the lower bedding is cool and immediate, not harsh, not resistant, only truthful. The fur comes over it next, then the heavier wool. One part of the covering lies cooler across the shins where it has not been folded long against itself. Another carries less of that contrast where the layers had been gathered together. This is another system entirely from the sacred flame. No bronze, no oil, no fire tending. Only body heat meeting wool, hide, and woven cloth and beginning the slower work of making the sleeping place your own. You shift a little farther in. The rail leaves the body behind. The wall remains beside you in dim timber and stone shadow. The bolster receives first the shoulder, then the head, its center giving in a way already shaped by repeated use. One side of the cover is smoother than the seam. Beneath it, the platform holds through shoulder, side, thigh, and lower leg in one broad, steady line. The body no longer feels perched beside the sanctuary. It is beginning to be held within it. The lamp gathers the sleeping place in a way the sacred fire never could from across the room. Its smaller light reaches the nearest fold of fur, the rail, the ledge, one section of wall, the line of your outer wrap where it rests over the platform edge. Beyond that, the chamber remains present but not insistent. The basin and vessel can still be known. One column still stands between this side and the farther reaches. The sacred fire remains lower and farther at the temple's center. Yet the room is no longer arranged around that center from your point of view. It is arranged around the bed place and the smaller light that now keeps it. You draw the coverings a little higher. At once the temple changes its relation to you again. The sleeping place becomes the first world. Bolster, fur, wool, body, platform, lamp. Around that, the sanctuary. Around the sanctuary, the outer evening beyond the threshold and wall. The sacred fire continues at the center of the chamber, but it now belongs to the room before it belongs to the body. You turn your head slightly and look once more toward the sacred flame. From here, it seems both smaller and more necessary. Smaller because the body is no longer kneeling at its lip. More necessary because the whole chamber now holds itself in relation to it. The vessel's rim keeps one low line of gold. The paving near it is touched more deeply than the paving beneath your platform. The basin catches and loses the light. The nearest column rises half seen beyond it. Everything continues exactly as it should without requiring you to return. The body settles more deeply for it. You settle a little farther into the bolster. The fur at the shoulder keeps more weight than at the chest. The lower wool is no longer newly cool where the body has already met it. The platform beneath has stopped feeling like a surface chosen and begun feeling like one that has accepted you. The wall to one side remains cool, but not unfriendly. The lamp remains lit, but lowered enough that the room beyond the platform has already begun to step back into temple dimness. The oil has been poured, the vessel steadied, the cloth folded, the cup used and left. The fire continues. For a little while longer, you remain there and let that be true. The lamp keeps its narrow field. The sacred fire keeps its farther life. The bedding begins to warm where body and wool remain in contact. The paving beyond the platform continues in cooler quiet. The upper chamber remains solemn and mostly unseen. The outer world has receded to what lies beyond wall and threshold, and no longer presses inward with any force. And there, with the sanctuary fully ordered behind you, the sleeping place now entered, and beginning to answer the body with its own slower warmth, and the sacred fire transformed from a center of direct tending into a farther living presence within the temple. The night reaches its next true stillness at last. You are no longer tending the flame. You are lying within the sanctuary beside its continued life, and the deep hours can begin. For a while, nothing more is required than remaining where you are. The sleeping place has already done its first work. The fur and will no longer hold their first coolness where the body met them. The bolster has stopped feeling like something arranged beneath your head and become the shape that receives it. The platform beneath all of it holds broad and steady through shoulder, side, thigh, and lower legs without asking to be reconsidered. The sanctuary remains around you, but at a greater distance now than when the lamp was first set on the ledge, and the sacred fire still held the eye more directly. The lamp stands low beside you. Its flame has been turned down until it keeps only the smallest amber field, the nearest fold of fur, the edge of the platform rail, one strip of wall stone, the darker line of your outer wrap where it rests close at hand. Beyond that, the sleeping place gives itself gradually to temple dark. The farther side of the platform is no longer clearly separate from the chamber beyond it. The carved upright at the bed's end keeps only one line of light along its smoother worn edge. The rest has already gone back into shadow. The body does not need more than that. Across the sanctuary, the sacred fire still exists. You do not look at it directly now. You do not need to. Once or twice, the faintest low answer comes from that part of the temple, a small inward settling at the heart of the vessel, a muted shift in the burning below the bronze lip, not sharp enough to become a vent, only clear enough to prove that the central life of the chamber has not gone out. The sacred fire is no longer a visible companion from here. It has become structure, a farther heldness within the temple, keeping one part of the stone chamber warmer than another, keeping the sanctuary inward while the winter remains beyond the walls. The lamp flame narrows once and steadies again. You watch it only long enough to know that it can now be let go. Its light no longer feels like evening light. It feels like the last deliberate light before the sleeping place belongs more fully to the body within it, and the temple more fully to the deeper night around it. Outside, the winter continues. It gives almost nothing of the world away now. The outer dark beyond the sanctuary is no longer court or step or cypress or roof edge in any useful sense. It has become one pale darkened winter beyond wall and stone, enough to say that the world remains, but not enough to make it readable. The temple has already done that quieter work of removing distance. The outside has been reduced to condition. You reach one hand out from beneath the covering and lower the lamp a little more. The room changes at once, but quietly. The platform rail loses its continuous edge. The outer wrap becomes a denser patch of dark rather than cloth. The nearest wall keeps one pale difference of tone and then gives even that away. The sleeping place does not disappear with the room. It grows truer. Fur, blanket, bolster, body, the warmer place beneath the coverings where your legs have already altered the bedding from waiting object to inhabited one, these remain. Everything else takes one measured step back. The dark does not take the room all at once. The nearest things remain longest. For a few moments longer, the lamp remains lit in this smaller state. The flame now gathers only a narrow amber hollow beside the sleeping place. It no longer competes with the temple dark. It lives inside it. The body no longer depends on it. The chamber no longer depends on it either. Its last work is not illumination. It is transition. Somewhere lower in the stone, the sanctuary answers once with a small contained note. Not repeated, not a pattern. Only old material adjusting to deeper night and colder outer air while the sacred fire still keeps its quieter warmth at the center. Then nothing. Then the sleeping place again. You lower the lamp once more. The flame contracts. For a moment it sharpens rather than dims, then steadies lower still. The chimney keeps one final small oval of amber against its curve. Then the darkness beyond that oval thickens by another degree. The sleeping place remains. The bolster keeps its shape. The coverings keep their weight. The platform no longer needs to be seen in order to keep being the platform. At last, you turn the flame down until it goes. The dark that follows is not full darkness. The temple has too much winter outside it, too much pale night beyond its walls for that. A faint suggestion remains somewhere beyond the sleeping place, not enough to show the outer world, only enough to keep the larger dark from becoming blank. The platform still holds its edges through touch rather than sight. The wall beside you does not vanish. It recedes into temple dark, the kind that belongs to old familiar sanctuaries when no more is required of them. The withdrawal of light does not break the room. It simplifies it. The ledge beside you is no longer lamp and rail and folded cloth. It is only the bedside region of the sleeping place. The sacred vessel across the chamber is no longer flame in bronze seen clearly. It is farther life, occasionally heard, and still central. The columns beyond are no longer separate uprights with bases and shadowed shafts. They are the broader chamber. The outer winter is no longer evening beyond the threshold. It is the pale dark beyond stone. The temple begins to hold together. You lie within that without needing to help it. There is no reason now to adjust the bolster, test the fur, or reconsider the line of your shoulder against the bedding. That work is done. The body is not negotiating with the platform any longer. It is being held by it. The same is becoming true of the sanctuary. A faint lower sound comes from the sacred fire again, so low it might almost be mistaken for the memory of one, if not for the slight answering awareness it creates through platform, wall, and the broader stone body of the temple. What remains at the center has passed out of full flame gesture and into lower sacred continuity. No bright movement need be seen for that to be known. The temple carries this differently from a household room. The central fire does not vanish into mere ember memory. It persists as a kept presence, smaller, steadier, less visible, but still essential to the chamber's order. Sleeping place nearest, the wall and darker chamber around it, the farther paving and central fire beyond that, the columns and higher stone above. And beyond all of that, the winter continuing around the outer walls in its own pale, quiet measure. The temple keeps these layers without asking you to map them precisely. You know them because you are already inside them. For a long while there is no sound at all, or none worth separating from the whole. It is not an absence between events. It is the deep temple condition itself, the kind of held quiet in which even the smallest sound, if it comes, will not feel like interruption, only like part of what it means for this sanctuary to continue being alive around its sleeping body and its central flame. Then one does come. A small note from stone or wood somewhere in the farther reaches answers the cold with a single quiet certainty. It does not repeat. It resolves itself completely in the moment it arrives. After it, the silence of the temple is not emptier than before. It is fuller. The sound has not broken anything. It has proved that the quiet here belongs to a built and kept place, not vacancy. Outside, the winter continues, still not as separate wind or visible movement, only as the sustained unreadability beyond wall and roofline. The world outside the temple is now reduced to one condition: pale, dark, winter-held, distant. No path can be followed there from the sleeping place. No visible detail could improve the body's rest even if it were available. The outer world has been reduced to what it needs to be and no more. No steps to think about, no court to consult, no weather to monitor. Only the sleeping place held within the temple, and the temple held against the winter beyond it. The body begins to feel the difference between these layers less sharply. The fur remains heavier at the lower body than at the shoulder. The bolster remains firmer at its ends than at the center. The sleeping place remains warmer than the surrounding chamber, and the temple beyond warmer in some lower parts than in the higher stone above. These differences do not vanish. They simply stop requiring active registration. The body no longer needs to refresh them each time awareness brushes against them. They become part of one broader heldness. Another long interval passes. No fire sound from the center. No stone answer in the wall. No shift from the outer dark that the ear can make use of. Only the sleeping place and the sanctuary continuing to hold their own arrangements in quiet. Then, much later, or perhaps not very much later, because time is beginning to lose its sharper edges here, the faintest inward settling comes again from the bronze vessel. Not a flame rising, not fresh tending, only the slow interior answer of what remains when active burning has passed into continuance. The sacred fire is still there. The central chamber is still being kept. The temple does not pass from evening into cold all at once. It releases the earlier brightness in longer measures than that. You do not need to turn toward the sound. It already belongs to the structure. The sleeping place has altered again without any action from you, not because it has become softer, because it has become more exact. The place where the body lies is now no longer bedding in general. It is your place within it. The bolster accepted, the lower layers no longer cool, the covers weight familiar enough to disappear into function. Even the platform beneath, which had been readable through shoulder, side, thigh, and hip when you first laid down, has withdrawn from specific notice into simple support. The room around that sleeping place is doing the same. The ledge beside you, if it is still consciously known at all, is no longer ledge as object. It is just the nearer side of the sleeping place. The wall is no longer separate blocks or planes of stone. It is the darker side of the temple. The far chamber is no longer basin, and columns and bronze and shelf. It is the broader sanctuary. The outer winter is no longer something beyond the temple. It is simply where the pale dark begins. The temple is sleeping into one shape around you. Less separation now between sleeping place, chamber, central fire, upper stone, and outer winter. They are all still there. Yet the sanctuary has become one night-held structure instead of a collection of named things. The intervals now matter more than the sounds. A faint settling at the sacred vessel is real because it rises out of a long-held stretch of temple dark in which nothing at all has asked to be noticed. A stone note in the wall would be real for the same reason. The body has no wish to move. Motion has lost its usefulness. Nothing waits to be improved. If the shoulder shifted, the temple would not become more night. If the coverings were adjusted, the sleeping place would not become more trustworthy. The active systems of evening have withdrawn one by one. What remains is a deeper passivity than any earlier part of the night could honestly claim. The outside world is almost gone now in every way that matters. The winter beyond the walls no longer even feels like something continuing in time. It feels like a condition already completed around the temple. Whatever movement the weather still has belongs to the world at a distance. What reaches you here is only its result. A softened outer dark, a held cold, a sanctuary enclosed within a larger pale quiet. Stone, bronze, cloth, fire, and use have drawn the temple inward around the night. The sacred fire answers once more, very faintly. Then not again for a long time. Its continued life is now doing more work than its sound. The central vessel remains part of the sanctuary's body, but no longer as visible evening, no longer even as strongly audible night. It has passed into reassurance. A flame once tended, a continuity still remaining, a temple already completed and now carrying its share of the night without help. You lie at the edge of that, and the whole sanctuary lies under stone and winter. There is almost nothing left to follow. The lamp is gone, the useful acts are gone, the visible chamber is mostly gone. The world beyond the walls has gone into pale dark. Even the sacred fire is now more structural than seen. What remains is the temple at its deepest settled point. The sleeping place holds, the chamber holds, the central fire holds, the upper stone holds, the outer winter holds. A final small sound comes from somewhere in the sanctuary. Not at the center exactly, not beside you exactly, only somewhere within the stone-held body of the room where cold, material, and long use meet in the middle hours. It is so slight it barely establishes itself as event before it resolves again into the larger held condition. After that, nothing. And there, with the lamp withdrawn, the sacred fire reduced to its low, unbroken continuity, the outer world softened almost completely out of use by distance, and night, and the sanctuary no longer presenting itself in objects and surfaces, but as one stone structure carrying the body through its deepest hours, the temple reaches the farthest point of night it can reach. There comes a point in the night when the temple dark stops deepening. It does not brighten yet. It does not loosen into day. It simply reaches the farthest point of itself and remains there for a while without going farther. You notice the change first not by sight, but by the chamber. The coolness remains, yet it has altered. It no longer feels like something still gathering through stone and air and the spaces above the columns. It is simply there now, settled where it means to remain until light begins its slower work upon it again. The sleeping place still keeps its own warmth beneath wool and fur. The bolster still holds the shape of your head. The platform still supports the body in one broad, steady line. Yet the darkness around these things has changed from something complete into something waiting to be changed. For a little while, almost nothing follows from that. No clear light yet at the temple's edge. No distinct sound from beyond the walls. Only the knowledge, faint as breath in cool air, that the night has carried itself as far as it needs to go. The sleeping place begins to return first, not clearly, only as one softer dark against another. The rail nearest the body becomes knowable before it becomes visible. Then the fur folded near the shoulder gathers a little more shape of its own. Then the line where the wall rises beside the platform begins to hold itself apart from the bedding below it. The temple has not come back yet. Only the nearest world has begun to do so. You do not need to move in order to feel that. The ledge where the lamp was left remains mostly hidden. The outer wrap resting near the rail is still only a denser patch of dark. The farther end of the platform keeps no detail at all. Yet the darkness between these things has thinned. The sleeping place no longer holds as one continuous shadow. It begins, by degrees too small to measure, to separate itself back into relations. Outside, the morning has already been changed by the night before you can see it fully. While the temple holds the dark within, the world beyond continues its own work without witness. Whatever pale air has gathered over the court, whatever cool brightness has settled on step, column, paving, and outer stone, whatever the night has left along roofline and ground beyond, has already altered the morning by the time the sleeping place begins to know it again. The first true light is not light exactly. It is gray. A diluted gray gathers somewhere beyond the sanctuary's opening, enough to find the lower edge of stone and hold there. The sleeping place receives none of it directly at first. It belongs first to the temple's edge, then to the chamber, and only later to the body. Morning in a stone sanctuary does not arrive as brightness. It arrives as permission for things to become visible again. The sleeping place now exists not only through touch, but by outline. The rise of the covering over your knees, the lower slope where it falls away at the foot, the dimmer shape of the bolster beside your face where no head rests, the line of the platform edge beneath the heavier fur. None of these asks to be examined. They simply return. So does the temple. The wall nearest the platform comes back first as a vertical relation. Then the carved upright at the bed's end, not yet in detail, only as a darker form with one slightly lighter worn edge. Then the ledge beside you, still bare of its objects in sight, but present again as part of the sleeping place's boundary. The broader sanctuary remains mostly tone, but now tone with distance inside it rather than one single depthless dark. At the center, the sacred fire remains. The chamber is returning to a flame that never left it. The vessel is not yet fully seen, but its presence can already be felt in the room's order. The central warmth has not vanished in the night. It has only grown smaller and steadier. A low red gold life remains there, less like a visible fire than like a point of continuity the stone has been keeping all along. Morning is not returning to absence. It is returning to what has endured. Below and farther out, the temple answers once. A small note from stone or wood, not loud enough to become a vent, only clear enough to say that the sanctuary is no longer in its deepest undivided state. The sound does not disturb the sleeping place. It restores the chamber around it. The farther floor exists again. The central paving exists again. The lower sanctuary exists again, though still mostly in relation rather than in sight. The sleeping place remains warm. The room's reappearance does not ask the body to leave what the night has already made good. The coverings keep their settled weight. The bolster has lost all trace of its first unfamiliarity. The lower bedding no longer presents itself as separate wool, fur, and platform beneath the body. It remains broad and honest under shoulder, side, and thigh. Morning may return the temple to sight, but the sleeping place still keeps the deeper truth of what the night has done. The gray begins to hold color rather than tone. Not much. Only enough that what lies beyond the sanctuary shifts toward the pale, stone-whitened quality of first morning rather than ordinary dawn. That is how the outer world returns here, not through horizon or sun, but through what stone and paving give back to the light. Even before the opening is fully read, you know the morning beyond the temple will not be the same as the evening that lay outside yesterday. The night has altered it. When at last you turn your head a little toward that pale, returning edge, the sanctuary moves with you in a more recognizable way. The opening is opening again. The wall is wall. The pale field beyond is not sky alone, and not ground alone, but both softened together by first light. If you were to rise and go to the threshold now, the steps, the columns, the court beyond, the outer paving, and lower wall would all still be there, but altered. Cooler in one way, clearer in another. The dark would have thinned from their surfaces. The pale morning would have entered them not from one direction only, but from above and across, along stone and open air together. You do not need to rise to know this. The temple brings the knowledge inward through light before it asks anything of the body. The lower part of the chamber returns in the same manner, not all at once, not as activity, only in relation. The sacred vessel at the center is no longer merely low continuity felt across the room. It is becoming the vessel again. The basin exists there, whether fully seen or not. The stool remains where it was left. The folded cloth is still near the ledge. The oil vessel keeps its place. The nearest column base stands where it stood through the whole night. A little more light reaches inward. The carved bed end takes a faint grain. The stone beside you separates into seam and plane. The ledge keeps its shape. Farther out, one curve of the basin returns. Then the darker rim of the sacred vessel, still low and quiet, but back in the room. The sanctuary is returning object by object without asking for attention to any one of them for long. At the center, the sacred fire answers once, very softly. Not as a new flame beginning, not as a fresh tending, only as the continued life that has crossed the whole night and remains now at the start of morning. The room does not wake to emptiness. It wakes to continuity. Outside, the pale morning grows clearer by degrees. The brightness at the temple's edge no longer belongs only to sky. It belongs to stone as well. Morning light does not merely descend from above. It rests along steps, threshold, paving, column base, and outer court, and from those surfaces it returns upward into the eye. The world beyond the temple is not brighter because the sun is high. It is brighter because the stone has begun to answer the day. You shift only enough to let the sleeping place settle more comfortably around wakefulness without fully entering it. A faint sound comes from outside at last. Not many, not the full beginning of day. Only one small signal that the world beyond the sanctuary has started again in its own time. A distant footstep on paving, or the softened closure of a door below, or the first careful movement of someone in the cool morning before the day has gathered pace. Stone changes these sounds too. It keeps them from reaching inward sharply. It rounds them before they pass the threshold. The temple remains gentler than they are. The sanctuary has carried the night so fully that morning returns without interruption. It can return quietly, edge by edge, stone by stone, object by object, without breaking the rest it has protected. The sleeping place now stands fully in first morning form. The carved end post pale at its worn edge, the platform holding its length again, the coverings visibly inhabited, the bolster marked by the night's long use. The wall beside you returned in morning quiet rather than lamplight. The broader sanctuary reformed beyond it. At the center, the sacred fire remains, lower than before, quieter than before, but unbroken. The vessel keeps it. The paving around it knows it. The chamber receives it as something that did not need to begin again with the day. Below and farther out, the structure is sanctuary again. Basin, stool, cloth, oil vessel, column, threshold, outer court. Outside, the pale day continues its work. It lies along the steps. It rests at the threshold. It keeps the court in a quieter brightness than evening ever did. The farther world beyond may still wait in cool air and open space, but none of it presses inward before it is needed. The temple has been entered at dusk, ordered around the sacred flame, gathered into evening, narrowed into the sleeping place, settled through deep night, and returned now in first light. You lie within the last quiet of that completion. The sleeping place still holds. The sanctuary has returned. The central fire still continues. The stone has taken back its morning edges. The world beyond the threshold has become trustworthy again. There is no need to rise yet, no need to look more closely. No need to tend the vessel at once, or lift the cloth, or go to the threshold, or read the court beyond the columns. Those things belong to the day that will happen later. For now, the temple asks nothing more. It held the evening outside itself in the world beyond. It held the sacred fire within. It held the tending, the stillness, the sleeping place, the deep dark, and the returning light. And there, with the pale morning now resting quietly at the edges of the sanctuary, the central flame still living at its heart, and the whole night completed, so fully that nothing in it needs your keeping anymore, the final truth arrives as naturally as the first quiet entrance did. The temple will carry the rest. The stone can go on receiving the day beyond the threshold. The vessel can continue holding its low gold fire. The basin can remain where it was left. The stool can remain by the ledge. The court can keep its pale morning stillness outside. You are already inside what needed to be reached. The morning has come back without breaking the flame. And with nothing left now to prepare, follow, or keep in place, you can let yourself drift the rest of the way down, while stone and sacred fire go on holding the day for you.